Okay, everybody, just getting started here real quick with our Ask Me Anything live stream here today. So we're kind of back on this Tuesday schedule. I do want to let people know that next week we're going to be doing a live stream on, sorry, I got to make a little quick change here. Next week we're going to be doing it on Wednesday. So in case you're kind of planning for election night live streaming, I won't be doing it here. I will be doing the day after the election a live stream, just kind of giving an overview of at least the initial results that we're seeing, as of course we are an all mail-in ballot state, and Washington State's ballots are going to be coming in for weeks after that, and we're going to be having the endless election season continue on for weeks after election day is over in Washington. That being said, we should be able to get a pretty good sense on election night, and certainly over the next day or so, as results kind of continue to roll in, we should have a pretty good idea about most of the results and where they're actually at. Quick reminder to anybody who is wanting to leave a comment here, when you put your comments in, try to remember to do @WeTheGoverned. It's usually a little bit easier for me to actually spot your question and kind of pick it out of the mix. I know a lot of people end up having a lot of commentary back and forth in the comment section. And that's fine. It's just that it's a little bit easier for me to find the questions later on if you've done that, so that as I'm kind of scrolling down through the questions here and trying to answer them, at least that way I can find your questions just a little bit easier. And when I am trying to answer the question, I will have it down below, just like you see this question here. And when that's there, you'll see it while I'm trying to answer that question, or at least doing my best to answer it. So real quick, before we jump into some of these questions here, wanted to just make a quick point on some of my speaking engagements. I did see a number of people who came up to me at the Washington Policy Center dinner last Friday down in Bellevue. Thank you for doing so. I always appreciate when people come up, especially if they're regular viewers of my channel and the videos, and especially if you share them with others. I really appreciate you coming up and just telling me how much you appreciate the videos or what you like or don't like about them. That feedback is really helpful when I'm out in public. And I know I get approached at the grocery store, the gas station, or a number of places around the state when I'm driving around, and I really like that because it gives me a little bit of direct person-to-person feedback, because otherwise I'm just talking to a camera here, and it's very different when you're actually talking to people. Also, for those of you who are kind of new to activism, I just want to kind of remind people about this. I do a lot of activism training around Washington State, sometimes out of state, but most of it's in Washington. And I'm happy to do some where you live as well. I don't tend to just pick dates and locations at random and then try to get people to come there. I usually have people organize themselves a little bit and get 20 to 40 people or more, up to about 250 people at a time. Anything more than that becomes a little unwieldy. But if you want to organize a group of people where you live, or you're already doing something with another organized group of activists and you want some training, how to dig into corruption, how to find out where your local government is, how to file PDC complaints, how to, just all kinds of stuff, how to set up maybe your reporting, if you had to organize a group of people to be watchdogs in local government. There's a lot of other specific issues that I can help you out with, but I'm happy to do that training anywhere you are interested in getting a group of people together, because I think the more of it that we do, the better off we all will be as a state and as a community, if we can have more people who are aware of how to be a bit more assertive and capable, I hope, as activists. So I just want to encourage you that if you're interested in doing that, please let me know. As we just kind of get the show going here, a quick update. There's really kind of 3 days next week that I'm going to be doing a variety of activities. On the 4th in Clark County, if you're in Washougal, we're having, the 4th is a Monday, so it's the day before election, so it's kind of an election eve, for lack of a better term, but the night before the election. Monday night, we're doing a big event with Patriots United in Clark County, meeting at Washougal, 6 to 9 p.m. I did a little quick video promoting this event, and I'll launch that on my channel shortly. I filmed it earlier today, but it'll be an opportunity if you're around. I'll be speaking. Jim Walsh, Representative Jim Walsh, will also be speaking as chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. There's some other speakers there. Should be a good time to get together with people, and they will also be doing ballot harvesting there. So you probably have already voted, but if you're interested in coming to that event and get all your neighbors' ballots or friends' ballots or anybody else who you feel like that you've been able to convince to finally get out there and vote, it's not a bad time to get it there because they will be delivering that directly to the auditor's office after the event, and that's going to be a good time to kind of get it delivered and get it out there. So that'll be a good event to be at on Tuesday night, the actual election night itself. Results start coming out around 8 o'clock to 8:15 our time. Sometimes some of the counties are a little bit delayed. I'm anticipating doing a live stream or being at the Let's Go Washington party, which I believe is going to be up in Kirkland. So that's my plan for a week from today. If you're there, that's great. I want to see you. If they are doing kind of a live stream event there, I anticipate that I'll participate in their live stream venue, whatever they'll be doing. But that's kind of my plan, is to be up in that neck of the woods. I realize there's a state Republican Party event down in downtown Bellevue, which isn't far away. And many candidates will also have their own parties as well for election night. And so we got a lot of stuff to talk about and go over there probably. I've been to a lot of these on election night, and if you've never been to one before, they're worthwhile going to. I think in the primary I went to congressional candidate Joe Kent's event, which wasn't too far from me. It was fun to see. I've been to a lot of these over the years, and if you're relatively new to politics, I think they're really worth attending. It gives you a chance just to meet people, and in a pretty informal setting usually gives you a chance as well to see the candidates, and on either a really good night for them or a terrible night for them. And either way, you learn a lot and you get a chance to chat with other people. So it's a good thing to do. My main live stream event next week will be on Wednesday, as I mentioned earlier, and the reason why I'm doing that is because it's the day after election, and I should be able to give a reasonable report card on what's going on around the state, and just how those election results are going to be impacting us in Washington State. So real quick then, let's just jump into some of these questions right now and do my best to start going through them, and then we'll probably go into a couple of the topics. I do want to talk a little bit about, so I don't forget about it, I do want to talk about the things that everybody should be watching for and looking for as we're kind of preparing for election night initial results, and just so that people get a sense of what they should be looking for where they live or the races that matter to them. So real quick, first question here. Thunderstriker, glad to see you back again. Thanks for asking so many questions. We had a number of people over the last couple weeks when you haven't been on that were asking quite a few questions as well. And it's good to see you here. That's really not much of a question here, though. Here's my surprise for you, Glenn. Do you like my new profile picture? Yep. Love your photo. That's great. I'm happy to see that. And I'm always missing anybody who's asking lots of good questions. So there we are. Here's another question. Shaded Muse. Spokane Clown Council Monday night voted to have people vote no on 2017, which I'm actually thinking you mean 2117, Initiative 2117, because it would take money away from North-South Freeway. They're like a little Seattle council. Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. It historically had been illegal as a general rule for elected bodies to take a position on initiatives of any kind. And so the specific violation was actually RCW 4217A.555, which is a specific misuse of public resources to influence or be used either in opposition to or in support of an initiative. And so that was considered an interpretation for a long time that made it that it was illegal for them to do that. However, in the last Tim Eyman initiative that he was able to run to bring back $30 car tabs, there was a big angst and drama. I want to say this was, I can't remember what year that was now. I'm sorry. It was either 2016 or 2018, but it was a number of years ago. When that initiative was on the ballot, the legislature had passed a change in the statute saying that basically they could take a position. They couldn't tell people how to vote, but they could take a position as a body and endorse or oppose an initiative. And many entities did that year. Actually, it had to have been 2018, if I remember right, because whenever that happened, I remember the city of Olympia decided to go way too far, and I did get them fined $10,000, their city manager anyway, for illegally misusing public resources to send out mailers telling people to vote no, which that is illegal. But they're allowed to get together now and have these meetings, and it's a virtue signaling effort by the elected body, and it's usually done by big tax, pro-tax people who want to extract more of your tax and waste it on whatever projects that they usually waste it on, and they just want more of it because it's never going to be enough for them, and they come out and oppose it. Now, 2117 is actually the initiative in Washington State that repeals the carbon tax scam, which is Inslee's Climate Commitment Act scam, the kind of the carbon tax bidding process that simply gets passed on to you, the consumer, and it's why you spend somewhere between 25 and 40 cents more per gallon than you should otherwise spend in Washington State. So this initiative to repeal that is a very popular one amongst regular people, but for the recipients of the $1 billion or so that they get out of it, $1.3 billion, $2 billion, it's a lot of money. That's a lot of grift. So the government ends up using that in one big slush fund, and they kick that cash out to all their political allies, and those are the guys you're hearing out there run these campaign ads in opposition to this because they don't want the gravy train to go away, and so they don't want to have their cash taken away. The Clown Council in Spokane, the city of Spokane, is one of those goofball crews that simply, for them, the world is not big enough, the tax pile is not large enough. They can squander any amount of money you send to them and set it on fire and burn it up on whatever silly and foolish projects that they have. Now, I'm going to tell you, the North-South Freeway is not a silly project. It's just a foolishly run and incompetently managed project that squandered cash for a long time. And they're using the fact that some small amount is going to be tossed into that transportation project and saying that the sky's going to fall. I mean, these guys squander and waste your money at every turn. And there is no way, until you replace them, you're ever going to have your money spent well. And if you don't believe me, just look at anything. Sound Transit in Washington State with a light rail. I mean, they're spending $1.5 billion per mile light rail with half the stations they promised, years late, and billions way over budget. Incompetence and corruption is the defining characteristic of the majority of the projects that these guys run, and all they want is more of your money so they can squander it and kind of feed it around, kick it around. The best way to understand how these guys operate really is to understand how organized crime operates. It's about just kicking cash out to your friends and keeping everybody happy. And so the reason why they're really so opposed to these tax reductions, or when the citizens are angry and they want they want to keep their own money, they want to convince you that they can squander your money better than you can spend it on yourself. And to convince you of that, they need to scare you into believing that if they have less money, and somehow that would make them be even somehow better than their current level of incompetence. So it is one of those things just to be aware of. But they are allowed to do an official endorsement one way or the other. I noticed in the city of Edmonds that they chose not to do it, which is wise because there's a big division in that city as well. But I'm going to tell you, out in Spokane, I'm almost positive that the people of Spokane are going to be voting yes on that. Vote yes, pay less on the initiatives is an easy thing to remember. There's 4 good initiatives. I've done tons of videos on those. If you don't know about them, please go down to the channel at We the Govern and look at some of those videos. Plus, I had a chance to do an interview with Brian Haywood, the prime sponsor of those initiatives. You can hear for himself explaining the arguments, where he's at. He's obviously biased because he's helped launch those initiatives. But I have to tell you, it's highly effective in the explanation that he has in telling and explaining why these things came about, what the public policy impact is, the opposition, the billionaires who support the opposition, like Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and Nick Hanauer, and all these other billionaires that are in our state that simply are trying to make sure that you pay more in taxes so that they don't have to spend more of their money on some of their pet projects that they want to implement in the state. So it's really an interesting interview, and I'd encourage you to go take a look at that if you get a chance. And I did get a chance. I spoke last week. It was kind of a fun studio up in Kirkland. It's probably too expensive for me to rent, but I really enjoy that studio. I think it's a great studio. It's way beyond anything that I've ever used before. So it was a fun place to go and test it out, and we'll see how it goes. If you'll notice too, one of the other videos I did last week, I borrowed a different studio, a friend's studio, to do a recording up in Kent. And that's why the lights were really different and the background was different in that particular video. And it was the one about the judge races. And the reason why, I just ran out of time here. Some of you know, I'm a charity case half the time. People are letting me use their facilities to do some of this stuff, and I only have so much time in which to get the output produced. And although I'm kind of trying to work towards being able to build my own studio so I can have a higher output of video production, I really have benefited greatly from people helping me, letting me go in and use those studios. And I had run out of time to finish that judge video last week in response to actually a lot of comments and questions that people brought up about judges. So I had tried to get that studio. I had to borrow my friend's studio in Kent and do that filming while I was up there. I had another meeting or something to go to, so I was stopped by and got that done. So anyway, always appreciate whatever resources I'm able to use to get more content out for you and hopefully for you to share it with others. I'm fully aware that everything I do is shadow banned and heavily suppressed, but the more people who hear about, I think, some of the content that we produce here, the more of a positive impact we can make in the community, and it's well worth doing. Next question, back to Thunderstriker down here. Don't know what's happening. YouTube's deleting my comments again. Please let me know if you don't see any of my comments. I'll ask you, I'll try to ask you the questions the best I can. Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes they are deleted, and that's not me that's doing it. I don't delete comments here. I guess if somebody had something really nasty that they were putting in here, I probably wouldn't read that question. But generally, that's not been a problem. For the last year or year and a half or so that I've been doing these live streams, people have generally been pretty good. So I'm not going to be deleting anybody's questions or any comments you might have. Let's see, and bringing that up, another question here. My comments get deleted. This is Hot Rod Classic. My comments get deleted all the time. Glenn, do you know why they pick certain folks? I never use bad language. I don't know what YouTube's algorithm really is pulling in on questions you're not allowed to ask. We do live in a censorship world. Google's run by, Google runs YouTube. And probably because I do a political live stream here, you're probably not allowed to criticize Democrats or something like that, which is kind of funny because if you ever watch my videos, that's certainly nothing that I'm changing. But it is an odd issue when they make it so you can't see it. I just say go try again, and you're likely to get your question through. Let's see. Shaded Muse, I do not know what's going on with your PC, so I don't know how to help you. I don't know that mine's showing a weird time here, but anyway, so I don't know what's going on. Kathleen, music lover, voted and checked my ballot status was accepted, and that is good. The one big improvement that I would say, since we're entirely an all mail-in ballot state, it would be great if we had some way of getting almost like a receipt back the way your ballot was voted. If there was a way to do that and still retain the secrecy of the ballot, I think that would add a level of credibility to the election process. And if there's a Secretary of State out there in the future, I'm sure you won't be a Democrat, but if there is a Secretary of State candidate who has a method of doing that, then I think that would help restore a lot of confidence in some of the election process. Although you could do that in person pretty easily. It's not rocket science. It's just something that politically people don't want to do, and I think that's a mistake. I think we should be doing that because you want to restore some of that credibility. Kathleen, music lover, again, Skagit County setup was weird, and I don't know if you mean when you say that their setup online was weird. The weird place was Island County, which is right next door. There's been some drama, and if any of you saw the Brandy Cruz show today, she covered it. Good for her, because I've been talking to some of the activists up there that the so-called, there is a Republican auditor in Island County. I met her before. I know I've had chats with her. I'm disappointed in seeing what she's done this particular election cycle, where just this one room where observers have to be, they're demanding everybody wears a mask, which by itself is a discriminatory action that has a disparate impact on Republicans or independents or people who just have the ability to think for themselves. People who have a herd mentality are going to wear the mask right now, but there's no mandate for wearing masks, as foolish as that might have been, and they're useless in the situation that they claim they were going to use them for. So why would they suddenly require that one little place only to have a mask? It's just bizarre. So The fact that election observers are being turned away and they're refusing to wear masks, and because they won't wear a mask, they can't go in and observe, is ridiculous. And it certainly merits a lot more attention. And I'm glad Brandy Cruz gave it some attention earlier. I know I've talked to some of the activists up there that are dealing with it. I haven't heard of anything like that out of Skagit. I think Skagit's been not doing that, but we will see. John Anthony, any early numbers so far in Washington State? And obviously, we don't know how people have voted. What we do know is the rate of early ballots being received. And because in Washington State we don't register by party affiliation, you can't with absolute certainty know that, is this a Republican early vote or Democrat early vote profile? You really don't have any certain way of doing that. Insiders with their databases, to whatever degree of accuracy that they can get based on, you can kind of get a sense of some of the voters as to whether they lean left or right. You're really only able to determine that based on whether they participate in the presidential primary. And because the presidential primary is the only time where you distinguish that you're voting as a Republican or as a Democrat. And I'm going to tell you that I happen to know quite a few people that voted in the Democrat primary this cycle, and so they probably are looked at as a Democrat voter, but the reality is they're a Republican voter. They just thought they'd have more fun voting in the Democrat primary. So I don't know. I mean, all that stuff screws up anybody's database or analysis of exactly whether somebody's a Republican or a Democrat. But regardless, what I do find is that what I'm being told by some of the people that do have the databases, as close to accurate as possible, that the macro early vote numbers are behind where we were in 2020. So not as many people appear to be voting early as were voting 4 years ago. But 4 years ago in 2020, we really had exceptionally strange numbers the turnout numbers were unusually high. So I would say that based on what I've seen, the last time I looked, though, I just don't have the current numbers right this minute. If somebody else has them, feel free to mention. Last time I looked, it was about 20% already that's total votes already sent in. But there's always a big lag time on that. For people who have sent stuff in the Dropbox or even dropped it off directly, it often takes 24 to 48 hours to have that counted in the system. If you've mailed it, it's your mate. If you rolled the dice and you gave your ballot to the post office, well, who knows when it'll get there, 5 days from now or whatever. You have to kind of calculate what the numbers are that are in transit and still haven't gotten there yet. I do think we'll have a pretty good idea the day before the election what the early received ballot numbers are proportionate to. I think we can get a pretty good sense of what it looked like 4 years ago. You don't want to look at last year, you want to look at 4 years ago. And it's hard to know. Insiders are telling me that there's a higher rate of Republicans voting earlier this year. That wouldn't surprise me. The push has been pretty strong to vote early. Dan Bongino, one of the big talk show hosts for the country, the guy that took over for Rush Limbaugh, he's been pushing that early vote narrative. The Donald Trump campaign's been pushing that early vote narrative. Joe Kent, one of the Republican candidates in a very contested race down the 3rd Congressional District, which is where I live, he's been pushing vote early narrative. That has generally been kind of commonly pushed out there on the Republican side. I haven't consistently heard that on the Democrat side the same way. So my gut tells me that you're probably seeing, even though the overall numbers are a little bit lower, it looks like the Republican participation in early voting is quite a bit higher, for whatever that's worth. But we won't know anything until 8 to 8:15 p.m. On Tuesday night. And here's something to remember, too. People forget this all the time, and they're going to hear the initial participation rates Tuesday night. And whatever that number is, the true final participation rate is going to probably be twice what that number is, most likely. And so we saw this in the primary recently, where people were saying, "Oh, the participation rate's around 20%." No, it ended up moving quite twice that by the time they got all the late ballots counted. And late ballots in Washington State, they don't have to receive them on Tuesday. They just had to be mailed by Tuesday, and so or dropped off in the mailbox or the Dropbox by Tuesday. So clearly, there's you can't know Tuesday night what the real participation rate is, and you aren't going to know it for several weeks. And you'll see that rate increase as each of the counties, it's 39 different counties, 39 different auditors, or in the case of King County, the election system, the election department they have there. But all of them are basically counting, adding their batches to the total count. In theory, the ballots have all been sent by Tuesday night, but they clearly won't be counted because you're going to have late ballots coming in from different places. Here's an example. My son went to college. My oldest son's going to college in Montana State in Bozeman, and we sent him out his ballot. And so odds are he'll mail it from Bozeman directly, and so it'll go through the post office. And that's a risk. It's a gamble. Hopefully the post office doesn't lose it. And if it actually gets there in time, hopefully he'll mail it in the next day or so. When he does, that should be early enough that even the post office can't screw that up. And but it won't be counted most likely until after probably late next week. That's what I would guess. So that'd be an example of the type of kind of late ballots that are trickling in as you go along. Most of whatever you see on election night, if it's within 2 to 3%, you can't be absolutely certain how the final election numbers are going to be, because you really have to watch the count over the next 3 or 4 days, because that's when the biggest batch of late ballots, but ballots coming in later, that's when the biggest batch are actually counted. And so as those numbers come in, whatever their trend line is, in whichever direction it's going, it could indicate closing or widening gap. It's going to vary a little bit. So watch what those numbers are over the next couple days on really close elections. If somebody's ahead by 10 points on election night, that gap is not being closed. I mean, unless you're in a super small jurisdiction with just a handful of votes coming in, you just can't close big percentage gaps very easily in based on what I've seen in the past. So those are kind of the basic things. I think we kind of got off subject there, but anyway. Kind of related to this, Kathleen, music lover, you're jumping back in again here. Do we have any idea how things are going? I kind of went through that a little bit, but what about ballot box sabotage? And this is how Washington State gets in the national news. Some of you might be aware, but it looks like there was some arson at one of the ballot drop boxes, destroying approximately 300 ballots in downtown Vancouver, which is in Clark County in southwest Washington. The FBI thinks that it's basically a coordinated attack by some clown who also attempted to burn a ballot box, commit arson on a ballot box in Portland, came across the river and hit one in Vancouver. But they're also suspecting there had been an earlier attempt at sabotage in an empty ballot drop box in Vancouver earlier in the month. And they suspect it's the same person. The genius was filmed driving a Volvo. And no license plate on the front. They weren't able to apparently read the license plate on the back, but I'm going to be very surprised if they don't actually catch this person. It doesn't seem like a super genius doing this. I don't know if there's a political statement here or just somebody trying to cause mayhem. But obviously, if you think that you're one of the people who might have used that drop box, it's worth contacting the county auditor in Clark County. You got plenty of time to address that issue and get a replacement ballot if your ballot was burned up. So, this has happened before. It's not super common. You're more likely, I think, just judging from what I've seen, you're more likely to have the post office lose your ballot than you are to have it burned up at a drop box. So I still think the drop box is better than mailing. Hand delivering it directly to the auditor's office, even if they have a little drop box right there and they tell you just to put it in that one, even that's the kind of gold standard best option, is to hand deliver it, get it to there directly. You don't have to worry about chain of custody where that ballot disappears. You don't have to worry about a disgruntled postal worker deciding to just throw everything in the garbage. By the way, that's not a conspiracy. Oftentimes that's just problems with work issues at the post office. It's not necessarily a political statement that the post office worker is doing, but these problems are certainly worth addressing and being aware of. And I think somebody will have the book thrown at them if they catch them for having burned that mailbox. Of course, if they're a leftist, they'll probably give them a promotion if they think they burned up some votes for Trump. Ben Garrett, you're asking a question here. How was the rally at the Capitol? I was there, went to that rally. That was Sunday. I actually thought we were going to get rained out. I was doing a bunch of chainsaw work outside that morning, and I remember calling a couple of my friends there, and I said, are we still on? Because it was pouring down rain. I live about 30 minutes south of the Capitol, and so it was torrential rain, and then it cleared up. And so I went up there. I was, briefly just speaking. I thought it went well. It was good for a live stream video. Some good Carmen goers running for Congress was there. You had Pete Serrano running for the Attorney General was there. You had some other legislators who were there. It was good. It was a nice presentation. Didn't last too long. Wasn't drawn out. Focused on improving ballot harvesting operations and encouraging people to get out there. Voting yourself is not enough. Go out there and get a bunch of other people to vote as well. Make sure you got their ballots. Make sure you're getting those delivered and get them in there as quick as possible. Let's see. There was another question here. So anyway, that event did go well. I was there. It was a relatively small turnout, but I think Sunday afternoons are always tough for events like that. But it was good. It was pretty, listen, nobody attacked us, so it's always a good day when the left doesn't come up and try to attack you. The Kathleen music lover here again. They brought in Gavin Newsom. Yeah, insulting as heck. And for those of you who don't know this, Governor Inslee, actually recruited Governor Newsom, who's the governor of California. I don't know. I mean, I think some of these guys don't realize how they look from the outside. But basically, he recruits him to come up here to Washington State to supposedly canvass, and I'm going to put parentheses around canvass, at a secret sauce location in Beacon Hill in Seattle. Because apparently they're trying to convince voters to vote no on the initiatives because the only thing that scares Inslee is that his Climate Commitment Act kind of grifting operation that he set up here in the state could potentially go away with this initiative. And so he's terrified about it because he was planning to probably get work after he leaves the governor's mansion through the kickback scheme that he institutes at the state level. And that potential income stream for him and his buddies is put at risk by this initiative that vote yes, pay less, right? Get rid of some of these stupid, ridiculous, wasteful taxes. And so he recruits Newsom to come up and doorbell. And if you think about this, exactly who are you trying to appeal to? They recruited Jane Fonda, of all things, to come up and help them. They recruited Bill Nye, the semi-science guy, to come up and, I mean, it's just ridiculous. They're really just preaching to the choir, which tells me, and I think when I interviewed Brian Haywood, he mentioned this as well, but it looks like they're worried about losing their base. They know if you're a conservative, you're going to vote yes on all those things. They know if you're probably a moderate, you're probably going to vote yes. They know if you actually believe math is real, you're probably going to vote yes on most of those initiatives. It's their own base that they apparently are worried about losing, and so they get these goofballs that are just offensive by almost everything they do, and it's kind of silly. But yeah, that did happen. Newsom came up here. I just kind of mentioned this, Ben, earlier. I already talked about this, but we'll have to find out who's actually doing it. Mostly the ballots were destroyed in Washington. One thing that they did mention, the news mentioned, here's a couple things, and this is interesting when you read these national news stories. One of them mentioned that in Washington State, that a higher percentage of Democrats request their ballots versus Republicans. And that's kind of funny. Like, whoever wrote that article, I don't remember what outlets I saw it in, but it was repeated a number of times. It was somebody who was just egregiously ignorant about how the mail-in voting system works in Washington State, because you don't have a choice. Everybody gets a mail-in ballot, whether you want it or not. Maybe you get even more than one, whether you want it or not. The reality is there's no choice, and partisan affiliation's not clear because we don't register by parties in our state, and we haven't since the 1930s. So it's you have to kind of presume that you know what the party affiliation is of people. Sometimes you can probably guess if they participate in partisan primaries over the years, and they've consistently participated in only one party. And so you can kind of identify Democrats and Republicans that way, but that's a small percentage, or it's a plurality of some of the votes, but it's not the majority of them. So you're trying to figure out really what partisan affiliation is. There's a lot of other databases they institute for that. It's hard to know. So the question is, whose ballots were destroyed? It's about 300 in Washington State, so we'll see what happens. And it's worth checking for anybody who might have voted in the Vancouver area and dropped it off that drop box. Ben Garrett, I turned in my ballot and I checked, and it's been counted. Hooray, hooray, you're in good shape. Shaded Muse, if you need Gruesome of California to sell your candidates, you are running bad candidates. Yes, he actually, I don't know how much he was up here. I think he might have been up here to help Bob Ferguson, who is certainly not doing as well as he was anticipating doing once he got the anointment from Inslee and the super special interests in downtown Olympia and Seattle. Ferguson seems like he's struggling. All things considered, this is going to be one of the closest governor races that we've seen since 2004, certainly since 2012 when Rob McKenna lost in a relatively close race. So we'll just have to see. It's going to be interesting. I mean, the initiatives also, having those 4 initiatives, all of which clearly reduce the cost of living in Washington state, I think that that's going to be a pretty big impact on voter turnout, or at least what motivates people to go out and vote. So I'm anticipating that the traditional profile could be quite a bit different, 3 to 6%. Some people are saying depends on the area, and also depends on whether they continue to vote down ballot. Remember, the initiatives are at the very top, even before the president's race. So we'll have to see how that goes. Let's see. Ben Garrett, what is the Republicans' best chance of winning partisan statewide office, not including Olson or Larson? Is it governor or is it another position? This is a great question, Ben. And I can speculate now, and people can go back and play this clip from this live stream later to mock me in the future if I'm substantially off. But what I would anticipate, where Washington state gets better results for statewide candidates, and I do think they're linked a little bit. The governor's race is going to be where a lot of the money on the Republican side would be spent and organized around helping a Republican governor candidate, because that's going to be top of ticket. The Trump political campaign isn't going to be super active in Washington because it's not considered a swing state, and you have all these other swing states out there. So even though the Trump campaign is going to want to have better turnout, they certainly want better numbers. Obviously, Trump's trying to win the popular vote even this cycle. Not the Electoral College is what matters, but he's also trying to win the popular vote too. So, because that's why he's been doing some of these activities in very blue states like New York and other places. I would anticipate that the governor's race is going to be kind of that marquee Republican race, and you have a candidate there with some ties into King County, and so I anticipate that, and he's got former law enforcement background as a former sheriff of King County, Reichert. I think that carries some weight, particularly in King County, where people are sick and tired of the Democrat crime wave that they've unleashed in the community with their soft on crime policies and creating drug addict, junkie, homeless camps all over the city, and then squandering millions of dollars and ultimately hundreds of millions of dollars in ensuring that corruption continues. People are sick of it. They may, at the Wine and Cheese Club, pretend like they're voting Democrat. It wouldn't surprise me if a lot of those people decide that maybe Washington state does actually need to change of pace and a different governor. So that's interesting. I'll be curious to see how that happens. The other races I would really pay particularly a close attention to, because I don't think they get a lot of attention. Look at the insurance commissioner race with Phil Fortunato running. The insurance commissioner race is an interesting one because clearly there's a radical difference between the Democrat and the Republican in that race. The Democrats' objective, Cooterer, just seems to be primarily focused on jacking up your insurance rates as high as you can get them. Now, part of it's her own incompetence and ignorance and stupidity that generally drives that policy approach that she takes. She's probably not smart enough to actually even understand the practical impact of a lot of her policy recommendations, but if she was smart enough to actually understand it, she wouldn't care because it's what she's been told to promote. So the single payer obsession, these other things that she's trying to do, it's just about destroying the insurance system so that you think it's bad now, wait until she gets in there. Phil Fortunato, on the other hand, the Republican running, clearly is focused on trying to reduce the cost of insurance to the average person in Washington state. And to the extent that message actually gets out there, and it's not just red team, blue team voting, Phil has the ability to make up quite a bit of space directly, and it kind of relates to this vote yes, pay less effort with the initiatives at the top of the ballot. As you go down, and he's the last statewide office listed as a partisan office statewide in Washington, so on the ballot. I could see a number of people, if they're paying any attention, voting for him, even if they would typically vote Democrat, just to reduce their cost of insurance, figuring he's their best bet. Remember, the insurance commissioner, it has this quasi-executive sort of role where they really do have the ability to modify WACs. They can't overturn RCWs, which is state law by the legislature, but the legislature rarely legislates things related to the insurance commission. But the insurance commission has a lot of executive authority under the rulemaking, which is under the revised Code of Washington, which is the law. You have the Washington Administrative Code, and those WACs rules are drafted at the insurance commission office. So if you have somebody in there who understands actually how it works and knows how to make changes to those policies and those rules that would make it a lot easier for us to pay a lot less and have more competition in the insurance market, it could be a pretty big deal. Let's see. Robert, glad your ballot was counted here. That's good to see. Jason Fisher, what's your thoughts on the firebomb drop box in Vancouver? I've already answered this one, but mandating them to be a secure government building. You could run an initiative that says that. I just don't know if that helps anything. One of it would be funny to put drop boxes inside the post offices, because there are post offices are mostly pretty ubiquitous still, even as many of them as they've closed down. But obviously there's a defeating element to put in the post office, because the post office wants you to run it through them. They get paid for those. You may not be paying that postage, but somebody's paying them that postage. And if you have drop boxes in there, you're really taking business away from the post office. That would be the only way I could see you would eliminate the likelihood of arson occurring the way that it just did. Anyway, it's just a silly thing. That's not a bad idea. The answer to that is yes, you could, but I'm not sure what the best way to do that would be. John Anthony, any events down in South and Lewis County at We the Govern? Well, I'll tell you what, there was a recent decision, I thought it was today, or certainly it was recently, where some guys got almost a year in jail for defacing some, I don't know if it's a gay pride fence display or something. Not a story I'd followed, but I happened to notice just before I started the live stream here, somebody had sent me a link to the article where these guys got like the book thrown at them, and remember, in Washington State, you want to steal somebody's car and cause accidents and mayhem, you have to do that like 7 times before they'll let you see a day in jail. And for them to throw the book, for that judge in Lewis County to throw the book at somebody for an act of what appears to be political graffiti, or I don't really know all the story on it, but it does seem a little out of whack compared to how they're prosecuting other cases. However, it does serve as a reminder, regardless of whether that sentence was ridiculous and disproportionate and disparate treatment sort of event. I always remind people, don't go out and steal signs, don't go out and vandalize, don't go out and cause problems like that in public. You wouldn't want it happening to you. It's kind of a golden rule thing. Yes, I know the left is nasty and vicious, and they always do mean things, but even so, the video of them destroying Trump signs or Republican signs or the Let's Go Washington signs are more powerful, and it's almost worth it for them because they can't help themselves in this reflexive sort of religious sort of orthodoxy that they have, where they have to suppress all dissent. It is worth it to document that so that people get a chance to see how these guys really react. Well, don't respond to that by reacting just as poorly. That's not really an effective strategy. So, I'm going to look closer at this case in Lewis County so I understand it better. But it was really ridiculous. Anyway, that's something that's going on down there. At the national level, by the way, just kind of on that line, I do want to mention that the Democrats do seem, and I think anybody who's talking about a red wave is making a terrible mistake. I don't want to presume or assume that that's true at all. It's very true that the Harris campaign at a national level looks like they're melting down and having all kinds of problems, but even if their campaign's an incompetent clown show, they can still do far better than that campaign would indicate that they're doing because of other reasons and other organizations that are out there doing the boring and not headline-grabbing work of just getting ballots, right? The unions are very powerful, and they're behind, most of them, their leadership anyway, is behind Kamala Harris, so I would anticipate, get SEIU out there doorbelling or doing things. From a practical standpoint, I just think that they're going to probably be getting more ballots or more votes by hook or by crook than what you would necessarily see, even if you have a campaign that seems to be melting down. The momentum does look like it's with Trump. I mean, one of the problems I think the Democrats brought on themselves was this weird narrative angle where they went from ode to joy at their convention, right? And now they're going to Hitler. I mean, ode to joy to everybody's Hitler who disagrees with me, and doing that in 90 days is hardly, I think, the path to consensus or even just normal behavior. And of course, it offends people who have the ability to think. I understand there's a bunch of people over there who can't, but even if you're stuck in your orthodoxy, at some point in time, you have to recognize when you're just offensive to everybody around you, and that seems like it's kind of weird to me. Anyway, let's drop down here. Ben, you had another comment I caught here. Reichert and Republicans, I'm assuming that you're referencing the attempt by Republicans to do pretty well in Washington State this cycle. One thing I'll just make a point, for those of you who are interested, there's a number of legislative races around the state where I believe Republicans have a certainly better than normal chance of picking up a couple of these seats. I think the Senate seat in the 28th Legislative District, which is kind of southeast King County, Maya Espinoza is running a really good campaign there for state Senate, and she's within the bubble. She was at 45% in the primary, maybe a little higher than that, but she's closing the gap, I think, on Tawana Nobles is a state senator there right now, who's I actually filed a PDC complaint on her because on the Democrat that's incumbent, been there for a while, because she bragged about having the federal government pay off her $100,000 of student loans, and she posted like the loan report on her Instagram page, which was foolish because when I went back and looked at her financial disclosure document, she never disclosed that debt for the last 5 years, 5 years statute of limitations. She'd actually been on the school board before then, but she'd basically concealed all that information from the public, and then publicly came out and admitted it was all paid off. Now, that's a lot of money to get paid off under any of these student loan programs. I think somebody should look into whether this was done in an unusual way in her case. But essentially, if you look at her Instagram page, she's like globetrotting around the world in fancy exotic resorts as like a swimsuit model or something on her own. I think she's supposed to theoretically work for nonprofit, but they appear to just be, maybe they aren't making any money, but they're basically sending her on junkets all around the world. And that's what she spends her money on, is doing these junkets. And that's what you, the taxpayers, paid for when you paid off her student loan. So, anyway, that's a race I would be looking at. The 5th Legislative District, which is everywhere from Issaquah to Enumclaw, that race, both with Chad Magendas and with Hargrove running that race and Peacock running the other position for the State House, I think that position is in play. Those races are potentially vulnerable. The Democrats that hold those seats currently. The primary indicated that the Republicans can do really well there. The redistricting that occurred to add Enumclaw into that district for that foolish Eastern Washington fiasco scandal that the Democrats pushed may have actually backfired on them in that district, because that district got a lot more conservative after that redistricting effort. I don't know how that's going to go, but it seems like it's in play. The 10th Legislative District in Whidbey Island and part of Skagit up there, that's well known. People are paying attention to that one. The North Whatcom District and the 42nd Ledge District, you got a number of Republican candidates that did very, very well within a very, very close races in the primary, which would indicate, depending on turnout models for the general, that they have a good shot of bouncing some really terrible Democrats that are in the House and the Senate up in that. The House seats up there. I don't think the Senate's in play in that one. And then also you have the 26th Ledge District, where the closest one there is Jesse Young, who's running. I feel pretty good about his chances of prevailing. That's a nice seat to pick up there. There's the on the peninsula. Honestly, the Republicans have a really good and more of a stretch race. They have a really good candidate running for the Senate seat and the 2 ledge seats out there. And that district's rurally conservative, depending on how Clallam County and Port Townsend shift or turn out. Those districts are are districts that could shift differently than people realize. So there's a number of these districts in play. I mean, the Republicans, despite themselves, and I did a video recently, I don't do too many videos like this, but I did a video about some of the Republican infighting and some of the foolish drama that's self-immolating sort of events that are occurring, particularly how H-Rock has diverted money away from trying to pick up seats and more on infighting races, like in the 2nd district, where no matter what happens, a Republican gets elected. It's a very poor use of funds and strategically a very bad choice on their part. But and I did a video that gets into all of this that should be launching maybe tomorrow on that subject. But generally, the Republicans are looking like they're in pretty good space. I mean, despite themselves, and they may pick up some seats in both the House and the Senate. I think that's reasonable to expect. But those are the districts where I'd be watching the trend lines to see what those numbers look like. If they're really, really close on election night, that ability to cross over and prevail in some of those races are a pretty big deal. Obviously, Judge Larson's race nationally, or I should say statewide, for Supreme Court is also a big deal. It's a nonpartisan race. I do think Olson's race for the OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, is also important. You know, Chris Reichel, the Democrat incumbent at the OSPI, has been one of the biggest sales pitches for homeschooling in private schools in the history of the state of Washington. And he has helped drive more people out of public school just through his incompetence and craziness in helping destroy and devalue public education so much that I think all homeschoolers and all private school operators in the state of Washington really should send Chris Reichel thank you cards for being such a nut job and being so weird and vindictive and crazy in how he's approached destroying public education, because he's certainly ensured that 47,000 families have decided that any other alternative is better than being under his leadership. So I think Olson's got a chance of coming in there. Let's see, I will come down. Just curious how many people watching have voted yet. I think most people watching this video have probably voted. I mean, that's going to be the profile of people watching a channel like this. This is a heavy politics channel talking about a lot of local issues in Washington. By default, most likely, if you're watching this video, this live stream, you probably are engaged in the political process. My guess is you probably voted. That's not enough, though. If you voted, that is the bare minimum level of civic engagement that I would expect you to participate in. What you really want to do is take your vote and your knowledge of how you voted and your recommendations on who to vote for and reach out to friends, family, neighbors who share the same interests as you do. Make sure they vote yes, pay less on the initiatives. Make sure they vote Republican for all of those statewide offices and in the legislature, and for some of the nonpartisan positions, you know, read up and get more familiar with it. It obviously depends on which county and city you live in, but I did a ballot or a video on how I voted where I live. You can see it for yourself, but I think that if you can help get more of those other ballots, and sure, get them in early. I just don't trust the post office not to screw up on election day or to have other problems that tend to pop up, especially when the left looks like it's losing its collective mind. They tend to lash out in violence and nastiness. They just can't help themselves. And so the last thing you want to do is be waiting until the last minute when you really can't correct the problem if there is one. So try to make sure that you get your ballot in early. And I've done plenty of videos on this already. I don't need to repeat that even more. Let's see. Here's a question. Hi, Glenn. New subscriber here. This is Jody2024. Thank you for subscribing. My question is, if the initiatives pass, do you think some liberal judge will put a hold on them? Well, there's a whole process of challenging initiatives. And remember, if all 4 initiatives pass, that means you have 4 different legal fights. My presumption at this point in time is that the 2066, which is the attempt to have a natural gas ban, that is so popular that even the crazy leftists have basically abandoned the fight against that initiative. To some extent, I think they've already surrendered on that one. So their pre-surrender on that allowed them, of course, to focus their fight on the other 3 initiatives. The 2117 is their big threat. They're going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at that. I'm sure there'll be litigation. But this isn't Tim Eyman, doesn't have any money to hire an attorney to defend it. This is Let's Go Washington with a pretty large group of capable people and a lot of attorneys that are ready to go and fight and go down to the mat on it. So I suspect that it's not going to be what you've seen before. Do we have corrupt and dishonest judges in Washington state? Yes, the majority of them are. They're thoroughly corrupt in every measurable way. They politically have been appointed. They're controlled and directed in a way that you've never seen, even at a federal level anywhere. So yes, we have a lot of terrible and horrible judges here. But In our state, historically, they'll only do so much to, eventually there's some level of self-serving that they want to get into. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how they would try to challenge it, but I'm sure they would try. Same with the capital gains tax, which is also a big cash slush fund for the left. That one they're going to try to protect. The repeal of it seems to be very popular when you see the surveys, but the millions and millions of dollars, about $30 million campaign against it right now, clearly indicates that the alignment of the Democrats, the billionaires, SEIU, and all these unions, all locked in opposition to reducing your taxes, clearly indicate that there's obviously a big juggernaut of established people there, but they're having to spend tens of millions of dollars just to tread water, and it looks to me like they're probably losing on a lot of these. I think the hardest initiative to pass is going to be the ability to give people the option to opt out of the long-term care tax. That payroll tax is very unpopular. It's obviously a scam. Anybody who's ever looked at it knows it's a scam. In fact, it was the only initiative the Seattle Times actually endorsed. And I think they were just, the Seattle Times has to sometimes pretend to be a newspaper and sometimes accidentally commit acts of journalism. And so in their desire to find something that they can endorse and feel like they're hurting their side the least, they actually chose to endorse I-2021-24, sorry, and that's the ability to opt out of the long-term care tax. And so that, it's just on its face was just a scam from the beginning. Everyone involved knows it was a scam. If you're a private businessman who proposed that stupid idea, you'd be in prison today for fraud. But of course, the government commits fraud on a regular basis, and so they're allowed to commit fraud. SEIU likes the fraud because the fraud gives them cash and kickbacks for their mandatory union membership as part of that whole program. It's just one big grifting operation. But all four of these are very popular if you explain them to people. But again, throw tens of millions of dollars at it, and they're going to try to muddy the waters. We'll see. The Let's Go Washington people have done a good job. So we will see how people vote. Look, vote yes, pay less is not hard. So we'll see how many people actually caught that message, and we'll see where it goes. Do we have any local entities running polls for Washington candidates? Scenario Frankenstein. And the answer is yes, to varying degrees of significance and competency. There's several Republican-ish consultants who do run like surveys on candidates with mixed results. Most of those surveys are marginally accurate. They seem to be all over the map. Their competency level is highly questionable. They're usually not very good. Outside business industry that sometimes runs their own surveys on different issues or candidates, they do it for their own reasons, but some of those are done professionally. And so I would trust those results within the margin of error, right, which is going to be dependent on the sample size and what it's like. It could be 2 to 3, maybe 4% of accuracy. There are some of those that are done. But the polling at a local level in our state is so politicized that you'll see two different groups run a poll theoretically on the same issue, but color the poll in a way to get different results. And so you see this big disparity of results in a lot of ways, and some of them are doing it to gaslight people, to convince them that, oh, the initiatives are doing terribly. You see the Seattle Times fall for that, a bunch of these others, but and there's a lot of echo chamber, informal sort of polling that gets done that I don't think is terribly useful. At the end of the day, an election is sort of like a poll. It's just a lot more thorough, and it covers a lot more people, and we'll have to see how it goes. Anyway, that's a real issue. Cristiano Suzuki, will this presidential election results in Washington State be any different than last year's? If so, why even counting presidential votes? Well, the same reason you're going to count them in Florida and Texas, where Trump's going to win overwhelmingly. You're going to count them in every state. That's just because somebody's going to win doesn't mean you don't count. Obviously, Trump would have it. It would be a shocking result to have Trump win Washington right now, based on what I've seen. The question is what his percentages are in Washington. My guess is he actually does a little better here than he does in 2024 or 2020. That would be my guess. But we'll have to see. So the presidential race is only one thing on the ballot. I think people don't realize how important a lot of these other races nationally, a lot of these Senate seats around the country are really critical. If the Republicans pick up a number of Senate seats, it at least makes it theoretically possible, if the Republicans can get out of their own way and be unified in just some common sense measures, that if you have the presidency in both houses, you have the potential to actually fix a lot of what's broken federally. Probably won't fix everything, that's impossible, but you can fix a lot of things. And if you're cutting back on taxes, if you're removing abusive regulation that's been put in place, if a lot of that stuff can be done, in theory, if the Republicans actually all win those races are pretty important. Same within our state legislature. Several of these legislative races are also important. Picking up more seats in the House, and both the House and Senate. We've seen examples just recently within the last 10 years where Republicans had control of the state Senate. And while they oftentimes weren't able to get a lot of their agenda items through, they completely prevented a vast array of stupid and bad and terrible Democrat ideas. Where we get into trouble is when the Democrats control all three houses enough that they're willing to push through crazy and dumb ideas, which is all they have left at this point in time. And so getting those local races and some of those legislative races to prevail, getting some Republicans elected in those seats, it's not because the Republicans the source of your salvation, but at least they aren't the source of your of the egregious, focused attempt to destroy your life, which the Democrats do represent in most of their policies. TZ Burton, you brought up a question here. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the Island County Auditor creating a law. It's not a law, it's a local rule, but mandating a mask to observe ballot counting. No law mandates masks. What can be done about this out-of-control auditor? Well, it's unfortunate. By the way, that's a Republican auditor in that county. At least that's what she said she is. And I've met her before. I've had talks with her about different things. I'm just surprised that, in a way, she fell into some kind of Democrat trap, I think, by deciding to die on this hill. It's a stupid rule. It's ridiculous. It has disparate treatment. It's targeting only Republicans or conservatives or independent thinkers. And it's done as a way to virtue signal to the lefties that you're down with the cause and you're on their side. And so you're, of course, only discriminating against Republican observers in this case. It is a ridiculous rule. It should be thrown out. If anybody actually believed in election interference as being a problem in our state, and that it doesn't include our Secretary of State or any Democrat in the legislative office today, if they actually did believe in election interference, though, then this would be an example of one where somebody's clearly discriminating and trying to do things that hurt only one side of the political party. It doesn't matter that she might have that same party affiliation. She's just doing things on behalf of the Democrats to hurt Republican observers in that case. And yeah, that's been quite a story. It is a worthwhile one to pay attention to. You got this is from KCADV. The two drop boxes that were set on fire, lefty or righty person responsible? No idea, but I don't know too many conservatives driving a Volvo. So unless it was stolen, I don't know, but it could be. Honestly, it could have something that has nothing to do with politics. Please know that there are crazy people out there that do dumb things. Remember that stupid power grid thing that went down a couple years ago in Pierce County where those guys took out multiple power stations? That was just a couple of clownish criminals who had seen Ocean's 11 and thought that was their way to break into a coin shop on the top of Puyallup Hill. When just dumb. It wasn't a terrorist strike. It was just idiots, criminals trying to do, and boy, did they get the book thrown at them when they got caught. It was helpful that they carried their cell phone with them and let themselves get photographed along the way. But nevertheless, these things are not always political. Political things are not always involved. Let's see. What do you expect the presidential election results in Washington to look like? Unfortunately, I think it will be 55% Harris and 40% Trump, best case scenario. No, I think you're wrong. I think you would see, my gut tells me you'll probably see Trump probably closer to 45%. If he gets above 45%, something's changing in Washington. Harris, I think, will get less than that, less than 55%, but we'll see. She's not that popular, even among her own side. But I'm not sure that Trump can prevail. It really depends on Republican turnout, especially in Eastern Washington. So we'll have to see. Let's see. Was Blue? Yep. Yep, this is so Glenn was Blue Star 245, keeping you company last week. Did any questioners filled in for me the past 2 weeks? Several of them did. They had lots of questions. It was busy, and a lot of people had some great questions. Ben Garrett, same. Did you vote for Olson and Larson? They were nonpartisan but endorsed by the state GOP. I did vote for them, and I did a whole video on that, so you could see where I actually did a video about how I voted, so it's not a super secret thing. Let's see. I'm going to try to jump down here. I don't want to miss any of these questions. T.Z. Burton, states are cleaning up voter rolls and judges are overturning these attempts. What are these legislators doing wrong that their legislation gets overturned? Voter Act mentioned a lot. And it's not so much the legislators that are cleaning up the voter rolls, usually the Secretary of State in each of the respective states. And to a lesser extent, of course, it depends on how that particular state's organized, but the auditors in the counties, usually they're the ones that are given initial responsibility for cleaning up the voter rolls where they live, and under federal law, you're supposed to do that. This really came out of a lot. People don't realize the history on this. I mean, you saw some of it in Tammany Hall history in New York City, where they would inflate the voter rolls with a bunch of fake people. And in New York City, they would. That's how you had this corrupt kind of mob boss running elections in New York City for decades. In the late 1800s up into the early 1900s. Right, it was a fairly corrupt program there for voting. You also saw it in the post-Reconstruction South, particularly after the Republicans pulled the military out. And there was a lot of corruption in elections there, and so one of the ways that corrupt places in the South would keep Republicans or freed slaves off of ballots were to basically flood the voter rolls with a bunch of fake people. They used poll taxes and intimidation and other tactics too, but inflated voter rolls was one of the ways that people would identify an abusive election system in the post-Reconstruction South, and was viewed as a racist strategy to prevent black voters from having representation in those communities. Nowadays, the left loves inflating voter rolls with fake or crufty voter rolls, let's just say that have a bunch of people that no longer live there, maybe don't exist. Certainly, they are super favorable towards getting people who are not U.S. citizens on the voter rolls. So essentially, cleaning that up is something you're mandated to do in federal law, but the last thing they want to do is clean up the voter rolls. At least they're showing their true colors now, so that's how it goes. Vote yes on all the initiatives. I would say yes if you want to vote yes, pay less, unless you just like having higher taxes and more corruption. If you like higher taxes, you like the corruption, maybe you're part of the kickback scheme, then voting no is a good plan for you. That's why you see the people who want to vote no on those. Let's see. Receipt would be okay. Yeah. Sorry, guys. There's a lot of questions. I'm going to keep jumping down here and catching these questions. There was somebody here who posted it. Oh, I appreciate this. Brett Malin from Washington, Secretary of State, 1029, which is today. 1,754,000 ballots this year. In 2020, it was 2,586,000 ballots. That actually seems high, but nevertheless, that shows we're behind what our 2020 numbers are. So that doesn't surprise me by itself. Again, what we don't know is the makeup of those voters and what we're looking for with those voters. But that's important to know. Eastern Washington in particular, I think, has the ability to have a much higher vote turnout this year if they are going to step up and hopefully do this. Let's see. Wait a second now. Crazy questions. I'm missing some of these guys. I'm trying not to skip through them, but now you got a whole bunch that just popped in. Okay, Brett Malin, you mentioned this. What do you think of ballots returning 40% behind? I don't know. I would say it's more closer to a normal election cycle than it was 4 years ago. It could be that there's a lot of scammy sort of behavior that's not going on that was going on 4 years ago. It's hard to know. But we'll just have to see. Let's see. Here we go. Question frenzy starts now. We'll see. what are the latest insights from the Virginia polls, and how might they reflect shifts in voter sentiment as the election approaches? Well, the big thing about Virginia is the late-breaking kind of trend towards Republican, towards, in this case, they're measuring, most of the polling going on right now is measuring the presidential race, right, for the most part, all other polls aside. And that's what everybody's talking about, and because it's so close, everybody's obsessed with it. Because of momentum questions and the appearance, anyway, as accurate or as inaccurate as a polling indicates, most polling seems to indicate that there's momentum towards Trump and away from Harris, and Virginia is no exception. The question is, does that momentum get high enough? I mean, you had Glen Morgan get elected out there as state governor, so does that momentum get far enough along that that Trump gets there? We'll have to see. It does generally support the narrative across the country, the same way that you're seeing New Hampshire and Michigan and New Mexico, I think, was another one, where the momentum is shifting differently, and maybe that's helping him. Is it possible for Trump to win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College? I think it's possible. I think it's unlikely for him to do so, and the reason is you're more likely to see a Republican win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote. And there's a pretty obvious reason for that, and that is that in the big, highly concentrated urban centers where they don't seem to be paying as much attention to, you have just a higher left-leaning population. That's going to skew California, New York, for example. That's going to, and Illinois and Chicago. That tends to skew the votes in a way, just like Seattle skews Washington State's votes. It skews them towards a Democrat, even if all these other counties or all these other electoral college states, the reason why you had electoral college was to give small states a say in governance for the country. So I would say it'd be unlikely if Trump won the popular vote. I can't see how he could lose the electoral college. That would just surprise me. Mainly, Thunderstriker, your question right here about how might shifts in New York and California affect the popular vote. Well, swing states determine the election. New York and California shifts. If they shift as much as some of the polling indicates they might, especially New York, then shockingly, Trump is actually in the running for a popular vote victory. I just wouldn't bet on it, and I don't trust these polls. So, we'll just have to see how it goes. Buck, just happened to see your channel. Thank you for your content. It's hard to find honest information in Washington State. Appreciate the nice comments there, and I'm going to continue to do my best. J-Mac, I had to request a ballot because even though I have voted for many years this year, Pierce County had not mailed me a ballot. Seems that somehow a space had been inserted in my name. Thank you for paying attention. I'm glad you requested that. You're not alone. I've heard these stories before. We've also had problems with the post office losing the ballots before you even get them. Not just after you fill them out, but flat out losing them before you get them. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. Question, Thunderstriker again. By the way, I'm skipping over comments because it doesn't look like those are questions. And this isn't Ask Me Anything, so I'm trying to get to questions here. If Trump wins this election, what do you think the chances of a Republican winning a future election? I would say they're pretty high, particularly if Trump focuses on fixing what's broken in America and also, more importantly, but related to that, addressing a lot of the election challenges and problems that have been introduced over the last 20 years or so, particularly with registering non-U.S. citizens and sloppy accounting, the corruption of a mail-in system in general. If some of that stuff's addressed, I think you're going to get a more accurate representation from people who actually are real and live here and the election results. And I also think that a lot of people would see that he isn't Hitler as much as the Democrats want to pretend like he is. How long do you think the Dems will try to prolong the count on election night? Good question. Probably as long as they possibly can. Knowing in our state, they're going to keep dragging it out for weeks because that's what they do here. And we'll just see what happens. Alan Lichtman still believes Harris will win. He knows something that we don't. I don't know. I mean, you always have people like this before elections who want to be the outsider. We'll have to see. Let's see. Kraken, does it even look like we can win against Ferguson? The answer is yes. One of the challenges, and I've said this before, I wish that Reichert's consultants team was made up of more competent people, but Reichert's got a chance here, and a better chance than normal. And I think people don't appreciate that. We'll have to see. I think pre-surrender is not a good plan, but this is going to be an interesting election result to watch. Reichert's certainly got a better chance than any I've seen since 2012, so we'll just have to see how it goes. Thunderstriker, question, who's your favorite president of all time, barring the common picks, Washington and Lincoln, etc.? That's always funny. I actually liked Reagan a lot, and I think Reagan is going to go down in history as being a much more impactful president than people realize. Part of it's winning the Cold War without fighting the war. Not without fighting a kinetic war, let's just say that. That was a pretty significant accomplishment. And certainly a legacy, I think, that he was clearly focused on, and he was fought at every direction. So I think he's probably one of the more underappreciated presidents in some ways. I mean, Republicans appreciate him, but I think over time, history's going to judge him well. Let's see, I think we already answered this question, actually, so I'm just going to keep going down. Missy, why don't we have cameras or police in the boxes? Well, we can't have police near the drop boxes. There's other problems related to that. You certainly can have cameras there, and if you'll notice, there's pictures in the paper and on the news stations for the arsonists caught in the act of trying to burn down. I mean, it's not like they didn't have videos of this guy driving up in a Volvo. That's why they know who it's him. There are cameras out there. Are there enough of them? No, I actually think they should just be public so that people could actually look on, can observe them, and that those camera videos should be a public record, but we'll have to see. Kodiak Girl, Inslee's daughter works for Gates. She does not now. She used to, that's true. She hasn't for years, but that is a true statement at some point in time in the recent past. Have you ever wondered why internal polling is more accurate than public pollsters? No, I haven't, because it's obvious. Internal polling is what you produce to get accurate results. Public pollsters have a different audience and a different aspiration for the data that they're collecting. And they don't want to be totally inaccurate, but they're making an attempt in many ways to try to be as accurate as possible. I am starting to get to the end of my live stream today, so let me just see. I'm going to try to catch any questions that I might have missed here towards the end. Let's see. Do you think, Thunderstrike again, do you think it's an overreaction, or could it be a wipeout landslide for Trump? I don't believe in wipeout landslides. 84 was as close as you're ever going to get it, with Reagan crushing Dukakis and winning 49 states. Those days are over. That's not going to happen for anybody, actually, ever again, I don't think. So I would be shocked and surprised. I just don't think that that's how it's going. But I think the momentum's on his side. And related to that was your next question about Trump's rallies in New Mexico and Virginia. I don't think he's nervous about not winning one of the Rust Belt trio. I think he's focused on trying to expand the map. Now, if for some reason he lost, people are going to mock him for doing this, but I do think that that's what's going on. Let's see, and I've already answered that question about Reagan. Who are you most excited to watch cope about the election? Cuban, Lichtman. No, none of those guys. I don't care about them. I think they're pretty useless overall. What do they know anyway? I am interested in seeing the senior level bureaucrats and some of the special interest groups and the media and the academia in general cope. I think they'll be the most unhinged. And the meltdown quotes will probably be worth saving. I hope people save these videos because they're going to be crazy. Cristiano Suzuki, what are your thoughts on the Boeing strike? Well, I think it's going to be super expensive. It's not that I'm, Boeing's had a lot of problems and they brought it upon themselves, dropping the quality control processes that they should have had in place. I think, particularly after the McDonnell-Douglas merger, it just seems to be like this ongoing problem. Outsourcing a lot of the stuff that they've outsourced, I think, has been a mistake. I'm not confident that whatever money they think they saved, that they got it back in the terms of quality in the final product. And I think it was a bad idea. I mean, I'm Washingtonian. I don't want them. I don't think it was a good idea for them to leave to go to Chicago for their headquarters. I think we just keep on having problems that start to add up. We'll see. I think this is going to be very expensive for Boeing, and they're going to suffer for it. Of course, Boeing's problem with not being able to have a space program, and Elon Musk destroying them at half the price is also highlighting a lot of problems that Boeing has brought upon itself. Megan White, do you think Trump as a Republican candidate hurts local down ballot candidates in Washington? Chances. The argument on this, I would say it probably did in 2020. I don't think it had too much impact, as much impact in 2016. This year, I don't know as much. I think it'll have some negative impact if you live in the Seattle area or someplace where the left is going to come out, not because they like voting for their person, but simply because they're desperate to vote against Trump. You know, that's a motivator, and it's an adequate motivator that people might have to generate the attention that they want, to get their candidates in. So we'll see what happens. But I would say it's not as negative down ballot as it used to be. Part of the reason is just, look, the Democrats have just been insane with their choice of candidates. Let's see, more Dems are voting Trump than Republicans voting Harris. Yes, I believe that is true. Now, I don't know what those numbers really are, but even if 2 or 3% Democrats decide to cross over and vote for Trump, that's a pretty significant thing. And again, that doesn't mean too much in Washington State because we don't register by party affiliation. And so I don't think that statistically is going to make too much difference there. Here we go. Are you concerned about the ballot order in North Carolina? It could be really dangerous, such a close race. No, I'm not really that concerned about that one. Let's see. Steve Leach, you got a question. In the Electoral College, Washington State is an all or nothing state. Who or what office actually determines who gets those votes? Well, theoretically, it's Secretary of State in the sense that that's what you certify the election, and then the election goes to the winner. So that is how it works. It's not like an office that necessarily determines that, although the Secretary of State is essentially the statewide entity that compiles the 39 counties and their electoral results. And I believe that's the process. I could be wrong because there is some little esoteric elements of the Electoral College that's out there, but I don't think anybody else would have. If you're going to intervene and somehow change that, then it's a little bit crazy. Gregorius Greg, other than doorbelling, talking to friends and family about their votes, what else can I do? It's all hands on deck. Well, get their ballots. I mean, if they say they're going to vote, get them to vote, be there, help them answer questions when they fill out and complete their ballot and close it up. You offer to take that right down and stick that in the drop box at the auditor's office where you live. That's what ballot harvesting is. It's illegal in some states. In Washington, it's perfectly legal. And brace the suck and go out and do it, because I think it makes a pretty big impact. Let's see. Will you have coverage on Tuesday? If I am, it's going to be live coverage from the Let's Go Washington campaign. I've decided that's probably one of the most consequential events going on this election cycle in our state, and I want to be there. Good, bad, or ugly, I want to be there and see what happens. They say is moving to North Idaho to hang out with Todd Herman. Well, I don't know who they is, but I love Todd Herman, and I miss him. I wish he didn't move to North Idaho. I understand why he did, though. I'm hoping to go do something with him pretty soon, by the way. So anyway, we'll just see what happens. Christy and Mike Fisk, how do we know our votes weren't changed? There is a video showing how easy it was to change on the Dominion machines. Well, number one, Washington State doesn't really have Dominion machines. There's only a handful of them. They're located in Franklin County, and I don't have any evidence there's ever been a change using a Dominion machine or any other. However, here's how you know. You do random sample hand recounts in different parts of the state. I've been involved in close to 30 of those now, and I have seen differences, for sure. There are some, but it's pretty minor, and usually we can figure out why they're there. I think obsession about the machines is missing the larger point, in that you don't need problematic machines to cause problems with the election process. All you need is a crufty voter roll, and you can do it old school, like bad results that have happened in elections for the past 2 centuries, and bad election rolls are a good place to start. That's where why people can't realize how important it is to fix those is beyond me, but that's the race. Quick question here, Derek Pletcher. I think the race for governor is pretty close. I can't tell you exactly how close, but it's close. It's closer than it's been in a long time. Let's see, Jason Fitcher, whatever happened, $30 incredible how fast the legal system moves compared to I-1639. Yeah, I know. Remember, the $30 car tabs, one of the challenges you had there was Tim Eyman had no attorneys, no real significant help, and had to try to battle that on his own with no budget, no money. And it was very difficult for him to be able to try to overcome that. So that is a big thing about about the initiatives. Technical difficulties. The propaganda on Reddit is insane when it comes to initiatives. Well, as you saw in some of the recent national news reports, Reddit has completely been co-opted by a bunch of leftists lately, and they just control it. So there's probably not a lot of that's probably native and real, but they're putting a lot of money into it, and to make it secret and hidden. Christy and Mike, I'm in Spokane. Vicki Dalton's asked about cameras at ballot drop boxes, and she basically said, no, we don't have the staff. How do I address this? Not enough staff to manage them? Well, Vicki Dalton is not an honest person and never has been. If there's anybody opposed to transparency as an auditor, definitely her. She's got a long history of trying to make the election observing process as difficult and opaque as possible. It's terrible to have people like that in the auditor's office, because even if she's not covering up corruption, she likes to conceal and obfuscate and try to make it seem like there's bad things going on if there isn't. I mean, she looks like there's bad things going on the way she tends to operate. However, that's a stupid response from her if that's the way she explained it. Now, she could argue they don't have enough money for cameras out there, and that might be true. But especially in Spokane, that city squanders money on the stupidest things all the time. So why can't they get enough money to actually cover the cost of cameras? I think they could. So anyway, guys, I'm running out of time. I want to close it up with this. Tons of questions I didn't get to here, but I think a lot of them are duplicative as well. I hope that all of you guys pay attention to what's going on out there. Be prepared for tough times when it comes up in the future. Hopefully there won't be any. But it's always better to be prepared than be sorry later that you weren't. Do vote. If you haven't voted yet, make sure you get your vote in now. Don't let it sit in your counter or your truck. And help all your friends and neighbors get their ballots in. That's one of the most important things you can do. If they agree with you, try to help get them in, and get them in early. Do not wait till the last minute. Do not trust somebody else to do it for you. You help take point and go in and get it done and help them. If you're going to do that, you're taking responsibility to make sure those ballots get there. Don't you screw up. Make sure you're the one who gets it delivered and helped. Listen, the reality is it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. It's not a single person that makes the biggest difference. It's a lot of people doing a lot of little things. A lot of times it's the grind that adds up over time and makes a big impact. So get out there and vote, guys. And I really appreciate everybody logging in and supporting this channel. Share it widely, share these videos, give me your critique, comments down below. Always interested in those. Got a video coming out tomorrow about some of the Republican infighting drama, and another video coming out real quick about promoting the event next Monday down in Washougal, where I'll be speaking. Hope all's well, guys. Just stay out there, stay engaged, keep the faith, and we'll see you next Wednesday at our next live stream, and hopefully we'll have some good news to talk about on election night. So with that, guys, we'll see you next time.